Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Michigan deserves so much better than what they're getting out of Lansing these days.
Today, we finish our conversations with the candidates for governor.
This is why I decided to step up with a Michigan First agenda.
Republican State Senate Minority Leader Aric Nesbitt joins us to talk about his campaign for 2026.
But first, after the first 100 days of the Trump administration, there has been a lot of polling, a lot of talking heads about where things stand. But what about among Michigan voters?
We were really able to take a temperature check of how people were feeling across Michigan.
That is Emily Lawler, politics editor at the Detroit Free Press. And she and a team at the Freep set out on an ambitious project.
We talked to more than 100 people, relatively a third Democratic, a third Republican, a third independent or other, as well as people who don't vote. And those people are not people that we were talking to at Trump or Harris rallies 6 months ago.
Emily and Detroit Free Press politics reporter Clara Hendrickson joined me this week. So what'd they hear?
Oh my gosh, what didn't we hear? You can really get into the nuance and complexity of people's viewpoints, often idiosyncratic viewpoints. I mean, on every single issue that Trump administration has tackled, from tariffs and inflation and immigration, and touted on the campaign trail that he would tackle. Like, we heard every range of opinion. On immigration, we heard people expressing a lot of excitement about deportations that this administration has pursued, and then a lot of nervousness and fears. And you really get at the personal impact of these policies. So it's a great way to just get at the real world impact of this historic moment and some of the unprecedented policies that we're seeing from this Trump presidency.
I think it was really interesting what people focused on. So, we left this really open-ended. We asked a couple basic questions about how they usually vote, their political ideology, who they voted for in 2024. But then we basically just opened up the conversation. And we had people who were really keyed in on some of the topics that were big campaign trail topics, like immigration that Clara mentioned, tariffs, certainly we heard a lot about. The economy generally, inflation, we heard a lot about, but also just niche issues that people were interested in. So I think that it was interesting to hear how those affected people. We interviewed one person who voted for Donald Trump who doesn't consider herself a Trump supporter anymore because she sells like mystical goods, like tarot cards on the TikTok shop, and the tariffs are just like wrecking her. She has a lot of imports that come from China. She then sells. And we talked to, I think, 2 or 3 business owners in a similar position. So, people were really keyed in on what affected them and then also just more general threats. And we heard from one person who was really upset about the cuts to public media. So, it just seemed like things ranked highly for different people in different ways.
We hear a lot right now about these times are unprecedented. We hear a lot about how divided the country is. Did you notice that when you were talking to folks?
I think there was a pretty clear divide still, but I felt like the rhetoric was amped down from right before the election. I mean, there's still a lot of polarized people, but I think people are making concessions that they weren't making in October, early November. We heard from Trump supporters who said, we like his policies. We think he's really made moves on immigration, on deportations, on the economy. We think the tariffs will work in time. But we really don't like his attitude or like the fact that he's antagonizing other world leaders, or on the flip side, people who support a lot of policies but say, I'm not so sure about these tariffs. So I think this is kind of a time of year, since we're so far from the next presidential election, where people are really more willing to explore the nuance of their own viewpoints and sort of where they agree and disagree with the person in charge.
And I will say where I did notice the divide this time, coming off the heels of an election where Trump won the popular vote and Democrats are trying to figure out how to position themselves heading into the next election. If you're a Democratic politician reading these responses, not a clear path out of this predicament. I mean, you have voters on the one hand who are upset that Democrats aren't calling Trump a fascist, across the party. And then you have other voters who say they'd be willing to maybe support a Democrat in the future if they stopped fighting him at every turn. So that was sort of one of the divides that I really noticed.
Well, you brought me to my next question. If you were to put on a political consultant hat, a dangerous thing, I know, but you've probably talked with more voters than some consultants have over the past bit. What's the message going into the next election about how voters are feeling and what they want from their elected officials?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, there were a lot of people who were dissatisfied with their choices, who just didn't feel strongly about either candidate in the 2024 election. So, I think if I were a political consultant, I'd be thinking a lot about candidate selection and who might have the most appeal or the strongest chance to really carve out a path. And I'm sure that's not rocket science. No political consultants are listening to me for secrets right now. But I would also say that one thing I saw in the results, and so we don't have a good read in Michigan on the basic number of independent voters because we don't register by party. The things we kind of use as measures for partisan breakdown, like school board races, for instance, are Democrats and Republicans and third parties, of course. But, I didn't have a good idea of how many people, when you ask 100 people what their party affiliation is, would say independent. It's a broad swath, and a lot of them seem very persuadable. So we've been a state where people have come and focused on turning out the base, but we could be a state where you come and you focus on converting people to your side with a political message and convincing people. And that is an old school style of politics that we don't see very often anymore.
One through line that I noticed was this theme or sort of repeated response that Trump hasn't been a surprise, that he's done what he said he was going to do. He's the first politician in my lifetime who's actually kept his promise. That's something that I've heard a couple of times interviewing folks. And whether people like what he's doing or not, that seems to be sort of a key takeaway. I guess if I were a political consultant, how do you get a candidate on the campaign trail to actually make promises that voters believe that they will keep once they're elected?
Finally, we're watching what's happening in the country. Some folks are super activated. They are super plugged in. Others feel like they just need to tune out or still are not certain how what's happening in D.C. affects them. What was your sense talking to these 100 Michiganders about how involved and active they are in the political system right now versus just wanting to take a break, particularly after 2024?
Yeah, I feel like I was surprised on both ends. As someone who was reading through, my editor partner, Sally Tato, and I edited all 100 plus of these. And I have to say that Sally edited more than I did. But, as someone who kind of got to see like the breadth of the sample as it was coming in, one of the things we asked people was how this presidency affected you. And people seemed to have a good idea on that. Like, I think people felt like they were keeping up with the news more because of the potential effects it had back on their lives. There's so much changing that, maybe it is a federal employee layoff that's going to affect you. Maybe it is the tariffs that are going to affect you. So I did feel like a lot of people were very tuned in. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm always surprised by how tuned out some people are as well. And to be fair, this is not October of an election year, right? So I do think that there are probably some people we spoke with who were paying way more attention in October of last year than they were paying attention today.
One thing that was a takeaway from the tariff conversation and inflation as well, a lot of folks who are supportive of Trump kind of taking a wait and see approach. Trump obviously has talked about maybe having to endure some short-term economic pain to onshore jobs, but folks are still seeing high prices at the grocery store, which could be compounded by price hikes brought on by tariffs. But folks who are supportive of those policies are at least saying to us that they might be willing to stick it out. We'll see how long that lasts.
Wait and see. Indeed. That is Clara Hendrickson, politics reporter at the Detroit Free Press, as well as Emily Lawler, politics editor at the Detroit Free Press. The story is we asked 100 Michiganders about Trump's first 100 days. Here is what they said. You two, thanks so much for the time and just for the amazing amount of work that was put into this just really incredible series.
Hey, thank you
Thanks,
so
Zoe.
much.
As voters still digest 2024 and the implications for today, candidates for statewide office are already looking to 2026. There's been a flurry of announcements, and we've invited the candidates running for governor to come on the show.
Today, we're joined by Republican Aric Nesbitt. He is Minority Leader of the state Senate. Senator Nesbitt, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with the elevator pitch. Why are you running for governor?
Well, Michigan deserves so much better than what they're getting out of Lansing these days. And this is why I decided to step up with a Michigan First agenda. I have a young family, 3 young kids. I understand the importance of education, the importance of growing jobs here, and the importance of actually delivering results for Michiganders. And having grown up on a 6th-generation dairy and grape farm, I understand hard work. I understand the responsibility. I understand our traditional values, whether it's faith and family and freedom. And that's why I'm stepping up and running.
Give us an issue, a specific issue. What's the biggest one facing Michiganders right now?
One, education. When 3 out of 4 fourth graders can't read a grade level, we got to drastically reform our education system. Accountability and choice. Same thing at the high school level is how do you provide opportunities and career opportunities and vocational training opportunities at the high school level? First, you got to get the basics down. Let's just get back to basics. And when you're a bottom 10 education state on reading scores right now, you know something's wrong. And with what you've seen over the last few years with the Democrats repealing our 3rd grade reading law that was never fully implemented because of COVID, removal of simple letter grades for schools so you see what actually is happening in our schools. And then on top of that, you look at the permitting. You saw that with Governor Whitmer 2 months ago, saying 6 years into her term, she's complaining about her departments and how they're doing permitting. This is like, let's be honest, it's like an arsonist who set a fire and called the fire department the day after. We have a huge issue from Muskegon to Macomb, from Monroe all the way up to Marquette. I've heard issues after issues, especially with Eagle. But on top of it, MDOT, the Liquor Control Commission, just time after time, issues of not having predictability with when permits are actually being issued. I just toured a site in Muskegon that had huge issues under this governor, hundreds of millions of dollars ready to go into investments. And the holdup is the Department of Environmental Quality, or the new Department of Eagle.
So you're talking about environmental permitting. Is that really what you think is top of mind for Michigan voters right now?
Economic growth and development and trying to grow the state of Michigan is always top of mind for Michigan families and voters. Let's be honest. Over the next 30 years, we don't pick up Lansing. We just keep with the status quo. Michigan's going to lose up to 700,000 people, according to state demographers. That is not acceptable. We can either become a poorer state, less educated state with less opportunities, or we can actually invest and grow in the state. And what we've seen under Governor Whitmer and the Democrats over the last 6 years is that they continue to put up resistors to capitals to grow and invest here in the state. And that's why I have a plan to put Michigan workers first. Instead of one that spent billions of dollars, nearly $5 billion have been spent on corporate welfare for some of the most profitable corporations in the world. That money could have been used to either provide tax relief for workers or invest in our roads and bridges or clean up our waterways and make sure that we have investment in water and sewer. Or what we've seen is economic development through press release, and it doesn't work. We got to get back to basics.
And yet, a poll of Michigan voters from the Detroit Regional Chamber in February showed that a majority of Michigan voters actually say that Michigan is on the right track. Are things really as bad as you say?
But at the end of the day, we need to fix education. We need to improve our infrastructure and roads. We need to make sure we have a clear plan on getting back to basics, on growing our economy. And let's be honest, if we're serious about growing the state of Michigan, we got to get back to basics. And that's how do you shake up Lansing, and how do you make sure that you're continuing to invest and grow jobs here in the state, improving education? How do you support taxpayers over tax takers? We need to stop Lansing bureaucrats from destroying jobs through the permitting process, provide tax relief to families. Michigan last year was the only state to increase the state's income tax. And we need to make sure that we look at all businesses and growing the economic environment here in the state, instead of just some of those politically connected businesses that we've seen under this administration.
You said income tax, and that's at least a debatable point. The Michigan Supreme Court ruled that a drop in the income tax based on revenue was temporary, and then it went back up to the rate that people...
Excuse me. No, that's not a debatable point, because at the end of the day, the partisan Whitmer administration worked with the treasurer and the attorney general in a partisan Supreme Court. I was there in 2015. The Democrats in 2015 knew that was a permanent income tax rollback, not temporary. You go back and look at the speeches. That was a political, the ends justify the means type of political ruling. That was wrong. And it's something where going forward, Michiganders deserve tax relief. And it's something where at the end of the day, Michigan's income tax increased last year by $800 million because of the Democrats in Lansing.
We're speaking with State Senate Minority Leader Aric Nesbitt. Let's turn to politics here in the final few minutes that we have you. You are running for governor in the Republican field. Congressman John James has announced he is running. He has run statewide twice before. We also have former Michigan Attorney General Mike Cox, who is running. He has run and won statewide. What does a campaign against these two candidates who have both run statewide and possibly others still to jump in the race, what does this primary look like for you?
Well, for me, it's about my Michigan First agenda and going out and talking to voters all around the state. I'm in Muskegon and Manistee and Grand Haven. Last week I was in Dearborn and in Oakland County. I'm continuing to work on spreading my message that Michiganders deserve so much better out of state government than what they're getting today. And let's be honest, somebody that grew up on a sixth-generation dairy and grape farm, somebody who worked my way through Hillsdale College with a degree in economics, later getting a master's in international business, somebody who's been on the front line and understands what they need to do, not just on day one, but on day 100, to go ahead and shake up Lansing and to go ahead and put Michigan students first, Michigan families first, and Michigan workers first. That's something that I'm going to continue to do. And as I go around the state, I'm getting great response from the grassroots. They know I'm a philosophical conservative that's results oriented and that can get things done in Lansing. And I think Republican voters and voters around the state are expecting somebody with a positive vision for Michigan and can get the work done to improve our economy, improve education, keep families safe, and create a better future for our next generation.
Finally, let's talk about the general election. Michigan is a swing state. We've got a Democratic governor and state Senate, a Republican House. Voters went for Trump in November, but also Democrat Alyssa Slotkin for the statewide U.S. Senate seat. Should you win the Republican primary, how do you reach out to represent those independent and swing voters?
That's why I'm engaging voters across the state, why I started early, whether it's voters in Downriver, or folks in Dearborn or Oakland County, or folks up in Marquette or Ironwood or Monroe. I mean, it's a very diverse state. And if you're going to take the time to listen to folks, engage people around the state, that's what I'm doing. And I'm somebody that's been proven over the years that I've been able to work on some of the toughest issues and get things done. And I think people respect somebody who actually works to get things done, that's more concerned with workers and families and small business owners than corporations or special interest groups around the state.
That is Republican State Senator Aric Nesbitt running for Michigan governor in 2026. Senator, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
And you can find the other interviews with candidates running for governor at the website michiganpublic.org/itsjustpolitics. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.